What if you could turn the skills that you're learning at your current job into a lucrative short or medium term rental business with your second home?
So I have a contract now for 5 months that I have no obligations. The party understands that the insurer is paying, that the guest is responsible for damages, and that I'm just a host. And I'm going to make $12,000 a month margin for the next 5 months.
Mike Stone was a corporate attorney until he gave it all up to become an entrepreneur in the short and medium term rental space.
2 suggestions. The first is literally your last sentence is most of the game. Tell them. That's it. That's my big secret sauce. Is I say, hey, I have availability. They say, hey, I actually have a claim in that area. Most people, I hope everyone is listening to this part of the podcast, most people don't get midterm rentals because most people don't ask for midterm rentals.
Mike's a great friend of ours. We met him at a conference in Miami, and it's been amazing to watch his transformation as he really investigates how to target insurance companies instead of individual renters to fill up his short-term rentals.
If you put your hands out and say, hey, I have availability, can you give me a guest? They'll say, here's what we have in that area. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does work, there's your slow season solved.
I'm 29-time Airbnb Superhost Jason Muth. I worked in the media business for over 25 years, and as part of my Chapter 2 in life, I'm now doing short-term rentals. Since 2016, I've welcomed over 5,000 guests and their pet companions into our vacation homes. We're here to show you how to create a smart stay. Here we go. At one point, you were doing Airbnb Arbitrage, right? I remember you telling me about some new building but I think you're out of that now. Is that right?
Yeah, that is one of my main war stories in STRs. My second deal ever. I was running my first deal was a quad. It was going really well, an arbitrage deal. And so I saw another quad that was twice as pretty and twice as expensive. And I called the guy and I told him, I was like, listen, I don't even have the inventory to meet the demand. I'm doing so well with this first quad and I'm comfortable running a quad and moving people around for, reservations. I was way too manual at that point, my business as well. But I was like, this one will be just as easy. Let me do this. And in my mind, twice as expensive, I'll charge twice as much, I'll make twice the profit. Now we know that's not how math works. It was just more expensive and it was, not that much more lucrative. And so I was underwater. I actually lost a ton of money on that deal. That deal lost me enough money that I will never do arbitrage again for the risk profile alone. And I completely co-host now. So the same business. And I still have 6 arbitrage units, my original 4, plus 2 more that I made around the same time as that second deal. It's my third deal. It's 2 other single family home with a guest house in the back. And they do so well and they are very easy to run. And so I'm just not getting rid of them, but I'm certainly not looking to take on more guaranteed rent and guaranteed furniture and guaranteed headaches of arbitrage.
And no equity, no appreciation, no tax
That's
benefits.
I understand the risk profile of I need to cover my mortgage, my insurance, and you want cash flow, of course. I understand that risk, but to pay someone else's mortgage, to what end? And then you're not getting tax benefits. You can't do a cost seg. You can't. There's just nothing. You're just throwing money into somebody else's pocket. It worked for me to get started, right? I can't complain too much. It gave me my freedom, but at the same time, it's a starter tactic. And as soon as you can own or co-host, it's just a better strategy in my opinion.
Would you recommend that arbitrage be something that somebody who's just getting into the space look at? Or if you're a little pessimistic about it, should they just wait until they can purchase and get the full benefits?
2 pro tips that I'll throw out there. I would say A, yes to arbitrage if you can get the contract and then get the door. B, co-hosting is better, but it's a credibility thing. So in order, contract to the door, I do it all the time where, especially with my midterm rentals, they'll send me an inquiry and they'll say, hey, I need a place for X amount of time. I'll then go find a homeowner and say, hey, I have a guest who needs 5 months. Do you mind taking a shorter lease? Whether it's furnished or unfurnished, I can deal with that too. Then I know that my obligations as an arbitrageur are only that of that lease. And I make that very clear. We can get into that. I have a story about it, but where that contract, I am not going to be the one on that contract, especially the midterm rental. You have obligations to the guest and the insurer, usually in my midterm rentals. And that's the arrangement that I'll set up. I don't want to then have the next 7 months of the year, I'm obligated to chase that rent payment. When this guest leaves, our entire relationship ends unless I can find you another door. So that's one way to completely mitigate your risk is you're only going to arbitrage where you have the guest first paying you and then you have the funds to pay less to somebody else. Don't say, oh, somebody else, I'll pay you no matter what. Now let me go chase guests. That's the difference, I would say. And then secondarily is if you're just getting started, the credibility issue is the main reason to do arbitrage over co-hosting, because I shouldn't say nobody, it's less likely that someone will trust you with their property. To that end, my best recommendation, I am so glad I have coaches, I'm in the right rooms. And then instead of trying to get your first arbitrage deal by taking financial risk, leverage the reputation of your group. Hey, I'm in Mike Sjogren's group. You may not know him, but this is what we learned. This is how we do it. Best operators in the country, best coaches in the country. I know everything. I just don't have the property to do it with. Can we partner? If you find the right person to partner with you on that and you give them the right pitch and you deliver that you are all in, all committed, this is what's going to happen. Your success is contingent on them covering their mortgage and making more cash flow than they would if they had a traditional long-term renter. If you can sell that, then they could give you that first co-host opportunity. After the first, it'll be much easier. I remember hearing that a lot when I was getting started too, is after you get your first deal, it's easier. It is so much easier after your first. So really just get started with one, put the work in, find the guy. I would still recommend co-hosting over arbitrage.
Yeah. Wow. I could see the litigation coming out. Like I could see the attorney, like just in the screen, like, you're very persuasive with the way that you sell, and, attorneys have to sell. And now you're definitely in a sales role. I'd never heard of the arbitrage strategy, kind of presented that way. I've always heard people talking about it where they'll rent a property, they'll commit to it, and then they have to you basically find short-term rentals or medium-term rentals. Instead, you're finding the guest, if the guest has an $8,000 budget, you find a place that's, $5K a month, you're just going to pocket the difference when you can, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the best. I just had my biggest win on that this past week. I had somebody reach out to me from my insurance relationships. She said she needed to replace a 12,000 square foot home and it was water damaged. I was like, wow. She goes, is there something like that in your portfolio? And I was like, let me find out for you. So I just started turning.
Let me check. Let me look up on database right here. Yeah. Now you're making phone calls, right?
That's it. So literally what I did is I got on Zillow and I started making phone calls. I reached out to a realtor and I said, send me everything. Her and her partner, the two of them are excellent luxury realtors. So they have a lot of multi-million-dollar listings. So I was like, anything that's open, tell me. Let's figure it out with the owner. I don't care. Just send me everything that you have. Can you get me anything on the MLS? So while I'm looking through Zillow, she sent me 14 listings from the MLS that were for rent, multi-million-dollar homes. And I was like, this is perfect. Called all 14 of them. 12 of them actually thought 12 of them wouldn't deal with me. One of them thought I was a scam. But the other one, I knew from negotiating with the guest side first that their budget would have been $45,000 a month. I turned around and found something for $33,000 a month. So I have a contract now for 5 months that I have no obligations. The party understands that the insurer is paying, that the guest is responsible for damages, and that I'm just a host. And I'm going to make $12,000 a month margin for the next 5 months.
Wow. $33,000 a month on the long-term rentals, also, quite eye-opening, but this must be a massive property.
It's 8,000 square feet was the replacement. The guest declined a few 6,000 square feet, and we literally nothing in Arizona is 12,000 square feet. The closest we found was 11,000 square feet in Gold Canyon, Arizona, which is so much in the middle of nowhere, completely the desert, and I don't want to send anybody out there. So I was like, "Have it? You try actual Scottsdale for 8,000 square feet," and she was happy.
It's a little more space out there than there is here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, a little bit. But now that obligation of $33,000 a month, like I wouldn't have even had the conversation with the owner about obligating myself to that. That's not even a thought. But now as a contract first and then getting the door, that's a no-brainer with no risk as an arbitrage deal. We'll then co-host actually at the end of this 5-month contract. I showed value first. I got her this deal. She's now making a ton of money for 5 months. She's like, this is great. Can we keep going? Sure. We'll change the risk profile again to co-host, but again, I arbitrage first. I show you that I can do it, and you get the money. And now let's go in it together, because she'll get 75% of that 45,000, which is actually around the same.
So you're talking about a medium-term rental right here, which you clearly pivoted over into, and a lot of your content is about medium-term rentals. You just shared something that I actually hadn't heard people doing before, and I'm guessing you're going to have a lot more of that, kind of in your back pocket. Talk about all the relationships you've built with all of these insurance companies, that are placing people who need to find accommodations because they have water damage, fire damage, whatever the issue is going to be. I know last year when we were talking in person, you were investing heavily in building these relationships with these companies.
Yeah.
Where do you start doing something like that? And like, what have you learned along the way?
Excellent question. And funny, you brought me back to mentally Miami when we were hanging out. I remember being outside the bar and I kept having to walk away to take phone calls for my first ever midterm rental, which was like a $13,000 contract for, it was like 2.5 or 3 months or something, whatever it ended up being, but it was a great deal. And I was thrilled. So that day is really when I got started. I remember I actually had to run up to the hotel to finish drafting that contract to get it out in time. Cause I even hanging out with you guys, I was like, I don't want to lose this 13, 15, whatever it was, thousand. So I got started. They reached out to me first, actually. The first time I ever heard about it was when an insurance company, or let me back up. So the way it'll work is there's an insurance company with the insured family, of course. They're paying their premiums and paying the policy. That policy generally allocates 20 to 30% of the total home value for alternative living expenses. So that company, ALE Solutions, that's what that stands for, is alternative living expenses if there's damage to the original subject property. So when that happens, the insurance company, I don't know if they actually try to find the housing themselves first. They may have a department. I haven't gotten that far. Although that is on my radar, but they'll reach out to another company like ALE Solutions, their competitors. You can research it all on Google. There's a bunch of them. And then ALE Solutions will try to find Zillow or whatever to, fill the properties themselves, or to find the properties themselves. I mean, for the insured. That's how ALE Solutions makes money. If they can't, they'll reach out to someone like me saying, hey, I can't find anything on Zillow. Can you provide accommodations for this family? It's, a couple with one kid and a dog, and they're in zip code 85254. Where can you provide a local property that's similar? This is their school district for the kid. This is, their pet requirements. This is all the, fenced in yard, whatever it is, they give me that. And those parameters usually are actually a lot easier to accommodate than anything short-term rental. And so I just say, yeah, of course we can do that. And in this home or that home, and I submit it back to ALE Solutions. They seek approval from the adjuster. When that happens and they're seeking approval from the adjuster, I'm now playing the negotiation game against a budget, not a person, which is why it's so lucrative, because insurance companies have budgets, not feelings. That's how I would say it. And so they're not saying like, oh, that's my money. I mean, there's certainly negotiating and pushback, but there's nothing to be, if it fits in the budget, even if it's a little high, there's not that like, oh, I don't know, can you throw in a, so yeah, that fits, go ahead. And the housing specialist from ALE Solutions that I work with, they don't care what price it is. They have some restrictions and commission bonuses and things that you can learn if you get into the nitty gritty, but overall, they just want to close the contract and move on. That's their job. So it's a perfect puzzle piece where these guys want to put families in good homes, and you guys are sitting there with homes saying, I would love families and high prices. I'm like, sure. Mm-hmm. So it works out great.
All right. So this is where I get the free advice. I have questions.
You bring me on this podcast, you do get free advice.
Yeah, I'm getting free advice right now. Okay, so here's the free advice. This is the practical advice in the life that Rory and I live. Okay, with our, we have 5 short-term rentals that we basically mostly short-term rent these places. 4 in New Hampshire, 1
right?
in Mass.
Okay.
4 in New Hampshire, 1 in Massachusetts. Okay, so the first quarter is always the slowest. We have 1 property near a ski mountain, so it does pretty well in January and February. But March and April are just slow. It's just, we call it mud season. Although Noah Khan has stick season is his song, right? From Vermont, right? It's mud season in New Hampshire. Yeah. So what does someone like me do? All right, where I might only want to find medium-term rentals for those 4 months, if that. Okay, from May on. Like, it doesn't make any sense in the world for me to medium term rent those properties because I make so much money short term. I just got an inquiry yesterday from corporate housing, whatever, corporate housing by owner. Yeah. And, they wrote like a really long, nice thing explaining who they were. They want to move back to the area. They have this dog. They have this, they have that. They want to come from July to mid-August. Okay. So I basically said, well, we have this smaller ranch property, which is a 2-bedroom, which is next to the one that you're asking about. And I could offer it to you for $9,000 a month because that's what I'm going to make short-term on that one little property. And like, I floored them. They were like, 9,000, that's almost $20,000 for just what we're going to do for the summer. We can't do that. And I'm like, all right, well, good luck. Like, cause that's what we're going to make in the summertime on that property. Okay. We're not going to make it in March and April. Right. So how does someone like me build a relationship with ALE or something like that and saying, listen, I could house people for these few months?
So two suggestions. The first is literally your last sentence is most of the game. Tell them. That's it. That's my big secret sauce. Is I say, hey, I have availability. They say, hey, I actually have a claim in that area. Most people, I hope everyone is listening to this part of the podcast. Most people don't get midterm rentals because most people don't ask for midterm rentals. If you put your hands out and say, hey, I have availability, can you give me a guest? They'll say, here's what we have in that area. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does work, there's your slow season solved. I ask, I outbound, and I can show you all about how I do it and what I do specifically, but nothing's going to blow your mind. It's not like, oh, Mike's got this whole crazy. Mike asks for guests. The same way I put an Airbnb listing up and they come naturally, I register my properties on ALE Solution and then I say, hey, what do you guys have? And so it's as simple as the outbound. But here's the other thing that I think is important that people definitely don't realize. I actually just released a piece of content about this the other day. I have a drawing somewhere. It's not close enough for me to run and get it. But the seasonality for a short-term rental, it's busy season and then slow season. And that's it. It's a normal seasonality curve. For midterm rentals, I'm looking to get more money than short-term rentals in the busy season also. And then average prices for the rest of the year. We don't have a slow season. So it's if 3,000, just for easy numbers, 3,000 is your baseline, and busy season you're making 4,000 a month, and slow season you're making 2,000 a month. Then in my busy season on the same property as a midterm rental, I'm looking for 5,000 in this busy season, and the same, what I say was average, 3,000 in the slow seasons that when you're making 2,000. Mm-hmm. And the reason that works is if you get something like, right, you're making $9,000 for that month, and your inquiry is, they're like, wow, I can't believe it. We were going to pay $4,500. You're right, exactly like you did. I wish you the best of luck. There are $4,500 houses out there. Go ahead. We just don't have that. We have $9,000 houses. So you just don't take a booking that's less anyway. It's never a problem. It's all voluntary. It's not, there's no instant book is what I'm saying. And then if you aren't getting those, what was the other thing to say? Well, I guess that's really is just you just wouldn't take it. But if you're asking for the bookings and you're telling ALE Solutions, oh, that's what I was going to say. Back to the budget's not feelings. When you're dealing with insurance companies and not the person who is individually trying to pay for themselves and their wife and their kids and their dog and their food, then you're going, hey, insurance company, I need you to cover this. They're saying, well, that fits in the budget. Here's your check, and they'll figure out the food and the family on their own. Yeah. And so it's like you can ask for so much more from the insurer than you can from a person. And the same thing applies in travel medical. If I'm looking to do a deal with an entity, a hospital, a staffing agency, I'm talking to the recruiter whose job it is to place a nurse in their professional contract, but also then in their house. And the alternative to that would be that the company gives the nurse a stipend. In those scenarios, I'm either dealing with the company saying, hey, this is the cost of rent. This is seasonality. I'm sorry to tell you, but we are in the short-term rental market, and this is $9,000 for these months. That's what it costs. If you can't give me 10, I'm just not going to do the deal. And that entity might say, okay, 10's in the budget. There you go. The nurse is going to do what you saw on CHBO saying, oh, I get a stipend. That $15,000 they give me a month, they say 10 is for housing, but really that's my profit if I don't spend it. So I'm going to go find $5,000 house. And then they also have to pay for food and car and dog and husband. So it's just always a thing. So I would say go to the business.
Yeah, Rory, that's what we have to do differently, I think, because, we've been fine with our short-term rentals. We're up year over year, with all the stuff that we've learned in our mastermind and all the optimizations that we've made, both technologically and just messaging. And it's like a snowball. Like the better you do, the better the platforms reward you, right? You just keep getting good reviews and they keep giving you more guests. Yeah. But all the people that I've tried to get a medium-term rental from, it's always been the renter. Right. I think that's one thing I need to switch. I need to talk to these insurance companies because all these renters can't afford what I want. And every single inquiry just doesn't work out from what I've seen so far. So, instead of giving up on, medium-term rentals as an idea, I think you're giving me the idea to actually try to switch the focus and try to switch who I'm talking to.
That's the biggest thing. And think about like you likely, even if you could afford, generally you, not you guys, but if you could afford a $9,000 a month home, then you're probably the type of person who's not looking to live in a $9,000 a month STR on peak season. You want even something even nicer. Like it's always that game with the person is like, they want as much as they can for as little as they could spend. That's natural. I would be the same way. I want to find the cheapest property that I could live in for 3 months. That's going to be baller. I got the pool, I got the Baja Lounge, I got the outdoor this, outdoor that. Oh, I'm gonna have such a good time outside. That's the house I would pick. But if you're dealing with insurance, or any entity, they just don't care. They just don't care at all. Okay, that costs. Okay, that fits. Send. Done. It's way easier than trying to negotiate somebody.